What's up, y'all? This is Mark Monroe, and welcome to the Come Up series. And, a lot has been happening within the marketplace in 2024. We've gotten off to like a very, very hot start. Kind of reminds me of something previous, but we can get into that conversation a little bit later. But this week, I'm going to talk about a few things in which that I thought that were interesting, things in which that have been pretty much, making me raise eyebrows that I found pretty riveting. And then just things in which that like I'm looking forward ahead to that are upcoming that I think that you might find interesting as well. So let's just get into it. So first thing that we got to talk about is OpenAI's pretty much unveiling of Sora. So if you don't know what Sora is, if you haven't been paying attention to what's been happening in the news, so OpenAI, as you know, is known for its ChatGPT platform, and then of course it also has DALL-E, its generative AI for images. Well, OpenAI said, you know what, let's raise the bar a little bit. And raise the bar they did. And how did they do that? They did that by coming out with generative AI video. Now, you're probably sitting back and like, whoa, Mark, like, is this like the old videos where it's like we see like things are like, looping all over the place, or even some of those NBA videos where you see like, they're playing as Greek mythology characters, but using NBA? No, nothing like that. Though that is probably possible that you can see that. But this is completely different. So with OpenAI Sora, what they're doing is that essentially that you can write a prompt and it will literally generate video content. And what I mean by video content, I mean, if you look at where we were at a year ago versus where we are at today, we have made some significant strides, like light years ahead strides from where we once were to where we were. Now, if you want to get a little bit more in-depth video, you can go check out MKABHD's video, which I'll leave in the description down below so that way you can check it out because he does a very good job. And of course, I follow him. He's pretty dope. Anyways, so yeah, they did some pretty interesting things in which that now it's going to start making some conversations start to rumble in specific places. Like, for example, do you remember when Hollywood had its strike for its writers as well as its actors? Well, this could possibly strike up some conversation as it pertains to generative AI video and the use of, let's say, creative spaces. Another area that we can also see that it can really cause some significant issues, if not handled correctly, or I guess I should say like monitored. Another space could be within the political landscape. So it's very interesting because in the same week that we heard about OpenAI Sora being unveiled to the rest of the public, or not to the public yet, but just showing them this is some of the things that we're doing. Sam Altman was like literally going ham on X, taking requests for videos. But then legislatively, we also had a lot of the tech titans, aka your Googles, your Amazons, your Metas, and it's whatnot. They were pretty much all coming together to say that, hey, that we will do our very best to literally combat deepfake AI technology, where they create videos that are fake, that could literally hinder and harm certain political campaigns when it comes to voting with viewership. So that's going to be very interesting to see like what that looks like, because if you've been paying attention, like that tech has been getting very like scarily like accurate. So not in the sense of its like accuracy in the sense of factualness, but just accuracy as it pertains to quality. Now, there's some things that you can still see that are like ultimately that cause some issues there, but like for example, hands, like 6 hands, or like ears and stuff like that. But those things ultimately over time will probably get better. And on top of that, it's crazy how like AI hasn't learned how to fully spell yet when it comes to videos, but we'll get there. But why does this matter to you? Well, because it leads us into the next part of the conversation where we talk about companies like Nvidia. Now, Nvidia, like for my friend Dan Ives, he talks about Jensen Huang being the godfather of AI. I don't know if he's the godfather of AI, Dan. I would probably say that more so like he's definitely the trailblazer when it comes to AI, but I have to look back at, like, say for example, the IBMs of the world, and then on top of that the Larry Pages and Sergey Brins that really got the party kicked off and started. So, you know, but I'll give it to him in the sense of, like, just for posterity reasons. I mean, he's been here for quite some time, and ultimately he's made the section look even more cooler. Him alongside with Sam Altman that are really like trailblazing the space, along with some other players as well. But it's interesting because of the fact that when we think about large language models and then also some of the other things as it pertains to contextual AI, Nvidia has been literally spearheading a lot of this, especially with its AI tech, and then of course making it available and the access of everybody's everyday desktops with GPUs that they could just buy at the store. That's going to cause some demand spikes. But at the same token, we've also seen that Nvidia stock has been on a meteoric rise since last year. Shout outs to the people who called in October 2022. But, All right, so, but we saw that essentially that chips have been on a meteoric tear, have been like literally crushing it on all different landscapes and cylinders, which kind of gets us to the part where it's like, okay, everybody's been cheering on AI, and of course, every single company that's been reporting its earnings has been talking about implementation of AI and utilizing AI, and then also like scaling up with AI. Okay. All right. So now we're getting to this place where are we starting to see a little bit of that exhaustion in the conversation? Now, why are we starting to see some of that exhaustion? And I've kind of like talked about it a little bit on X, where I mentioned that, hey, you're comparing like valuations and market caps of companies now, where we're starting to hear some of those conversations take place. So take, for example, Nvidia. They report earnings this week. This video at the time of where I'm recording it is on Saturday, the week before Nvidia's earnings, where the expectations couldn't be any higher for Nvidia, given that the market cap of Nvidia is currently sitting at about 1.8, very close and closing into $2 trillion. I mean, think about the companies that it has now surpassed within valuation. It has surpassed Amazon. It has surpassed now Google. And when you think about those companies are bringing in hundreds of billions of dollars in revenue on a quarterly basis. Whereas Nvidia is probably bringing in about maybe 20 to roughly $35 billion in revenue. But the only thing that kind of holds those arguments at bay is those profit margins. Those profit margins by Nvidia are sexy, and the fact that they have a strong demand and that they can't fully meet the demand has been really propelling the stock to levels in which that we can probably say like, okay, hey, kind of like what we saw in 2020 with Tesla stock. I mean, if you need a reference. So it begs to ask us the question, does Nvidia belong to be there? I mean, or is it too soon, too quick, too fast? Well, I mean, one of the things that I would say if you're watching NVIDIA, or if you're very much so a part of the NVIDIA story, which I believe in NVIDIA story. I want to make sure that I'm very clear about that. I believe in like NVIDIA story, AMD story, and many of the other chip sectors because of the fact that I strongly believe if you're going to build the infrastructure, it starts from the thing in which that powers the infrastructure, which is your chip technology. And so chips are ultimately the first part of the story, and then we start to see it trickle on its way, and the bull market in that space broadens itself out to other hardware companies, other AI-based companies, and other software companies. So that's ultimately how I see it playing out over the time frame. But what makes Nvidia's argument a little bit interesting is because of the fact that they report earnings this week. So what you should be expecting and looking for is, of course, a full year raise in guidance, and then also what you should be expecting, of course, is a beat on the top and bottom line of EPS and revenue. But then also you should be seeing that essentially that they don't just meet expectations or just simply beat the expectations. What some folks are looking for is them to blow it out of the water. Possibly if we don't see that happening, or if we could potentially see that there's other headwinds that are coming out. For example, the demand was high, but then at the same token, that given the demand was high and you couldn't meet the demand, but now there's other players within the space, this could potentially pose an issue with allowing, say, for example, other competitors like a la an AMD or even a Google to step into the space and also start to supply those things. Another headwind that we could potentially see is the fact that some of those other major companies that are buying your tech, they start creating their own. Now, we've seen this with like what Apple has done, where they were once upon a time using GPUs from Nvidia as well as AMD, and also using CPU chips from Intel, and then they started to make their own. And then essentially it's like they made it proprietary for themselves, and then ultimately they cut those other companies out. And then we've seen that also with Google with its TensorFlow technology as well. So again, there's a lot that can transpire here within this space that people just really probably need to just take a step back and like wait for the data to analyze. So I'm going to be paying attention to that. Now let's shift gears a little bit, shall we? Let's talk about one of the most interesting, and it's an interesting conversation that's now starting to be had, and you're also probably seeing it in your neighborhood coffee store, where you see sometimes a weirdo that's sitting there at a table or walks into your coffee shop with some goggles on their face. Yep, we're talking about them. Today, we're also going to talk about MetaQuest 3 versus Apple Vision Pro. Now, I've been meaning to talk about this for a minute. Now, let's move MetaQuest 3 to the side for a second in this conversation. Let's talk about Apple Vision Pro, because I get this question a lot in conversations where people are asking me, Mark, well, $3,500 price target, that's pretty high. Who is their customer? Well, it's been very interesting to see exactly how the use cases have been playing so far with Apple Vision Pro. So here's my take on Apple Vision Pro. Now, before I move on into those things, I want to discuss and add some disclaimers. I believe that this is the first part of the iteration cycle for Apple, in the sense that you start off with a high price premium product, and then ultimately you come in with a medium tier, and then you come in with a lower tier. The high price point tier ultimately gives you better margins, which also allows you to fund and fuel the next iteration of other things. Kind of like what we saw with Tesla with Model S, kind of like what we also saw with Apple in releasing Pro products first, and then releasing lower tier models as we go through. High margins ultimately create more cash flow, so then that way you can also invest more into the space. We've seen it with their what was it? I think it was their headphones. I think when they got into the headphones game with the AirPods, we kind of like started to see that. So who is their customer with this? I think that honestly, it's a healthy medium of literally creating the first ever wearable MacBook. That's my hot take for the Vision Pro. It is the spatial version of a MacBook Pro. And so I think that there are some things in which that they need to fix, but I think that that's the first iteration of that product. And then I think that the next thing will be the spatial space for a mobile product, aka an iPad or an iPhone. And then, of course, the final one is pretty much like the watch category, where essentially it becomes like your everyday wearable glasses that essentially that is prescribed and working together with insurance companies. That's literally the trajectory for Apple, I believe. So we're starting off and we're looking at the MacBook Pro version, or the MacBook version of Vision Pro. So of course you can connect, desktop, you can connect keyboards, mice, as well as like even another MacBook or another device to the Vision Pro. And it's kind of like that extension of that desktop computing or mobile computing device. I think that that's where it ultimately shines within that space. Now, of course, you can take it along with you where you don't even need those devices. So that's where it's really given me those types of vibes. Now, which brings us back to Mark Zuckerberg. Because, Mark Zuckerberg can sometimes be a little bit petty.
I have to ask, Apple just announced a mixed reality headset called Vision Pro. What do you think about this headset?
Well, a few high-level thoughts. I mean, first, I do think that this is a certain level of validation for the category. So I think that there's a chance that them coming in actually increases demand for the overall space. Of course, the $3,500 price. On the one hand, I get it with all the stuff that they're trying to pack in there. On the other hand, a lot of people aren't going to find that to be affordable.
And on top of that, he's like, look, I've been in this space. I've been here. You are here because of the fact that you realize that what we've been doing has validated the space, and you want some of that too, that market cap. And so we welcome you, but, also, respect the room that you walk into. And so he was saying that essentially that he believes that his product is better. Now we'll see what Meta looks like when they bring out the next iteration of their vision of their Meta Pro series. The first one wasn't quite that good, but these are amazing. Like the idea of what we're seeing in this revolution of devices is quite remarkable in the sense of we're seeing that essentially one, the stuff that literally Meta is integrating within the space and creating their own app store ecosystem within Meta is quite remarkable. The fact that they've been able to partner up with Microsoft on not only the productivity side but also the cloud gaming side, which kudos to you, Microsoft. I like the fact that you're playing nice with other people finally. It just took you a few CEOs to get there, but I mean, you're here. I think that that's something that we should definitely pay attention to, and I think that we're going to probably start to see that also take place from Apple, where Apple starts to open up their App Store ecosystem, where they start playing nice with other people, and where we probably finally get to see like stuff like gaming and other stuff enter into the space. And I think that these wearable headset devices are really that gateway for that. Now, of course, there's some things in which that need to, transpire. Like, for example, battery life is still, trash on, these devices. I mean, you can get a few decent hours, but, it could be better. And then on top of that, eye strain, I think that Apple's experiencing some of that right now. So, I mean, when we ask, okay, hey, Mark, well, who's going to win the race? I think it's too soon to call. And I think that honestly that they're headed in somewhat similar directions, but they're attacking the point. They're attacking the problems from different vantage points. Apple's attacking it from their ecosystem, where they're going to really rely on their ecosystem in order to make it happen. And then Meta is going to attack it from the standpoint of consistently building an ecosystem, using social spaces, using those areas in which that you can collaborate and essentially get work done and also meet people and whatnot, still making the world more social. I think that that's going to be definitely, Meta's real like winning Trojan horse in this race. Whereas Apple has kind of like made it where it's like a individual experience. Now, it's going to be interesting to see that if Apple concedes that, then they agree with Meta's theory. Again, I like it, and what we're in the market of seeing right now is competition. We're seeing competition, and that's the reason why you're seeing great innovation. If you get the chance, go and check it back and look at like historically what happens when we see, companies really start to challenge one another, and look at the innovation cycles in which that we see. It's actually very good for the consumer, but at the same token, it's creating some scares here. For example, and I'll get to the economics part now. Given that we've been in a high inflation environment for quite some time, now we're starting to see some issues arise even within the tech space. So if you haven't really been paying attention or adding it up, go check out the website layoff.ai or FYI. I think it's layoffs.fyi. And with Layoffs FYI, what they do is they keep track of folks in whom which that have been reported that they've been laid off. Well, a lot of software engineers have been getting laid off. So it's not just like other industries that have been getting hit very hard. It's also the industries that are also creating the new industries as well that are laying off their employees. So this is something to definitely pay attention to, because what will the AI infrastructure look like, especially for companies that are trying to lay off and protect profit margins and to get a hold of their operational expenses or spending. But at the same token, we're stepping into a space where it's like this can also have grave impacts as it pertains to economic development and GDP. So just things to pay attention to just as we move forward. So when you see, like, for example, how much things are costing to produce, or say, for example, what we're seeing as it pertains to GDP reporting of gross domestic product, input, output, as well as production, these things can have a grave impact. And if it's happening within the tech space, rest assured that it's probably already happening in other industries. So, I mean, these are some of the things in which that are on my docket. I kind of have stated that I didn't really see us doing any rate cuts in March, though I could be wrong. I kind of see it in the May environment, maybe even potentially April, and then maybe do two to four rate cuts in this environment. And then from there, the Fed just takes a pause until they go into the next year. There's also word of a potential mid-year recession that could be on the horizon, where we're starting to see that the data is not looking as good as it was, and hence the reason why the Fed is given reason to pause on any type of potential rhetoric of potential rate cuts. They want to see like more data points, not just CPI or or production or PPI, but more so what they've been saying is that they're following more so PCE, but personal consumption expenditures. I don't know. So as we move forward going through the things in which that we're going to pay attention to outside of just the election year, pay attention to the innovation, pay attention to mergers and acquisitions, also pay attention to IPOs, because I think that we're starting to heat up there. And some of the ones that have been very reluctant to go IPO, it would be interesting to see if they actually go IPO later on this year or in the mid-year, especially given in the sense that capital is still a little bit tight. And then on top of that, continue to keep studying and keep researching, because as you know what I say, the more you learn, the more you earn. And until next time, I'm Mark Monroe, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace, y'all.